He confidently tackles the final hill, and then he sprints across the finishing line in 57 minutes, 57 seconds, the 8th best time. But is it too good for Pensek? The yellow jersey is labouring up the final climb. Unlike on Alpe d'Huez, the weight on his shoulders today was just too much. Ronan Pensek finishes 49th. He's lost almost 3 minutes to Claudio Chiappucci, and the yellow jersey has gone in this Tour de France for good. It's the first yellow jersey for Italy in 20 years. Chiappucci has emerged from the Alps with a 7 minutes lead over the favourites. That's an enormous gap. Defending the leader's jersey now is new to Chiappucci, and his Carrera team will need to be careful on this hilly 13th stage from Villard de Lans to Saint-Étienne. The field are happy to be going away from the steep climbs of the Alps. Frenchman Laurent Biondy is one rider, though, who needs attention from the race doctor. He's suffering from heat sickness and takes a pill to steady his dizziness. The Tour de France has a tremendous backup team. The only thing the doctors can't do is ride the bicycle. A Carrera rider crashes, and with him a rider from Helvetia La Suisse is also down. And Dutchman Martin Ducrot needs a pain-killing spray after another crash. In the pack, Claudio Chiappucci moves up, shadowed by Miguel Indurain. The race leader is nervous about a 30-man breakaway which contains Ronan Pensek, and it's gained 90 seconds. With his yellow jersey endangered, Chiappucci joins his teammates to chase down the dangerous move. It needs a tremendous effort under the midday sun. Greg LeMond counter-attacks with Indurain, Hampsten and Eric Breking, and they soon pass the remnants of the breakaway. Surprised by the attack, Delgado and Bunyo chase desperately with Lajarreta. They're already 90 seconds behind. Miguel Indurain is told to wait, but he takes a quick drink first. In front, Hampsten comfortably follows Eduardo Chozas, Eric Breking, and the energetic Greg LeMond. The defending Tour champion knows that he has to make up every second and minute he can on the precocious Chiappucci. Approaching the summit of the Croix de Chauburet climb, LeMond still leads Breking, Hampsten, Chozas and Roberto Conti. Behind, Indurain has closed the gap to only 20 seconds and momentarily sits up to wave Bunyo, Delgado and Lajarreta through. Back down the mountainside, an exhausted Chiappucci is all alone, with no teammates strong enough to help him now. And at the top, the yellow jersey leads a small group more than 4 minutes behind. In front, Greg LeMond piles on the pressure. He now has a chance to take time out of Chiappucci. While Indurain again leads the chasers at 60 miles an hour on the swerving descent towards Saint-Étienne. LeMond rides flat out all of the way to the finish, where he's content to watch his companions fight out the stage result. And that goes to Eduardo Chozas on the left from Eric Breking. LeMond's attack has blown the race wide open. Chiappucci is almost 5 minutes behind. Pensek nearly 8.
What was the situation with you and Delgado? What were you aware of in terms of you two during particularly the end of the race?
Delgado, I wasn't sure how much we had in front of him. I had no idea until I finished the race how much time I had on Delgado.
And with regard to Penzec today?
I wasn't paying attention. I was thinking of eliminating Capucci, and Delgado was behind. A lot of riders were behind.
You intended coming into this race to ride it hard and make everyone else ride a hard race. Did you do it to your satisfaction?
Oh, I think there's some people who are suffering today. Yeah.
And how about you?
Oh, no, I felt great. I mean, I felt great until last 2 kilometers. I just all of a sudden ran out of liquids. I got like what we call the bonk, just the last 2 kilometers.
And how important, though, was it for you to win this stage?
I don't even think about winning this stage. I'm thinking about winning the Tour de France.
So what about tomorrow?
Another day that's going to be difficult. I mean, these days are very dangerous. It's really hot, hard. Anything can happen. But I'm confident I'll be good tomorrow, too.
Were the mountain climbs harder today because of the heat?
Oh, I'm sure that it wasn't a hard climb. It made the day harder, yeah. Again, I think a lot of people were dehydrated. I was getting there at the end.
Thanks,
I feel.
Yeah, you seem a little bit spaced.
I am. I'm like out of oxygen. It's like dizzy.
Sit down if you want.
I want to get out of here.
Thanks, Greg.
The 14th stage traverses the hills of central France to a mountain-top finish at Millau. It's a ride of 205 kilometres. The start is at the medieval town of Le Puy, complete with a firing cannon. The 168 survivors climb away from the town, facing 5 hours again in the saddle. The attacks soon begin, with 5 breaks developing in the opening half of the stage. There is a long descent into the Tarn Gorge with 60 kilometres to go. Where the peloton is still riding slowly, crossing the river and heading downstream towards Millau. Frenchman Jean-Claude Bagot has broken clear of the front group. He hopes for a stage win. But the peloton behind has finally started to move. Descending quicker than most, the Italian rider Bruno Cenghialta catches up with Jean-Claude Bagot. And together they start to work. French champion Philippe Louviot also tries to catch the leaders. But the pack is getting closer as the final finishing climb approaches. And as Volkswagen leads team leader Greg LeMond up the mountain at Millau, the breakaways have been wiped out. The pack is together at the front. It's a long climb to the finish. A sudden attack comes from the normally passive La Diretta, and he puts in a massive effort. He doesn't know whether there are riders still ahead of him or not. This charismatic Basque rider once had a fan protect him from the rain on the Spanish climb by running alongside him, holding an umbrella. But today, La Diretta needs no help at all. A look over his shoulder and the gap is there. La Diretta decides to keep going. There's a chase from behind by Gianni Bugno and that man, Miguel Indurain, having a marvellous Tour de France. Then comes a Colombian, William Palacio. He also takes up the pursuit. And the small group behind has again dropped Claudio Chiappucci, the yellow jersey. Greg LeMond and Delgado step on the gas together. And they are followed by Palacio and the rest of the pack. Raul Alcala is the last rider of the group. By the finish, Marino Lajarreta has stayed away on his own, but he still believes there are other riders in front of him, and he forgoes the normal victory salute. 24 seconds later, Miguel Indurain rides away from Buño to take second, while Alcala sprints from the back to take fourth from Le Monde and Breking. So to stage 15, the roads are flatter as the riders face 170 kilometres from Millau to Revel. This area in the south of France is steeped in history from Roman times. For the riders, there is no initial need to hurry, as the next battleground for Le Monde, Chiapucci, Delgado and Breking is the upcoming Pyrenees. On the lesser climbs, the battle still remains, though, for points in the King of the Mountains title. But for a while, the field in general rolls along together. Charlie Motte, who lost his chance of winning this race in the Alps, is anxious to show himself as a stage contender at least. And the Frenchman attacks at every opportunity, attempting to start a breakaway move that might help him win the day. Caught, Motte keeps the pressure on and is soon ahead again. This time he has a strong ally in his teammate and King of the Mountains leader, Thierry Claverola. Claverola continues to enjoy a great tour as well. Tour leaders watch from afar as Motte's group gains ground. "30 kilometres from Revel, Motte breaks clear alone, loading up with drink for the final push to the finish. Charlie Motte finished second in this year's Tour of Italy, hence the reason for making him a pre-tour favourite. He's also one of the finest riders when racing alone at speed, and his lead quickly builds to over 3 minutes. The Tour leaders have no longer any interest in Charlie Motte, so he continues to gain time. He plays to an enormous crowd on top of the last climb of the day. France and Motte were finally enjoying a great day out. He arrives at the finish over 2 minutes in front, with no change overall among the leaders, except that a split in the field near the end has given Chiapucci a bonus of a few seconds gain over Greg LeMond. Low cloud, green countryside and a chill wind. It has to be the beautiful Pyrenees that tower above France and Spain. And it's here where those with thoughts of victory must now prove their qualifications. It's all uphill from Blagnac via the Col d'Aspin and the Col de Tourmalet to Luz-Ardiden. A ride of 215 kilometres, and not surprisingly, Claudio Chiapucci fuels up for a day he knows will be both testing and painful. The first challenge is the Col d'Aspin, the lowest of the day's climbs, and usually a stepping stone of no great difficulty. But today things are different. A small group of riders is ahead, and while the field behind questions the move, even thinking of it as suicide, Chiapucci, the race leader, is acting just like that, a race leader. He sets a tough pace. Chiapucci was not interested in the help of the lesser men who had taken up the challenge with him. For days, everyone had talked about this stage and how much time the Italian would lose. No one had expected this, least of all the other Tour hopefuls who kept up a rhythm behind without too much effort yet. Chiapucci, since that first day breakaway, has warmed to the feeling of wearing yellow. If he was going to lose this race, he intended to do so in the finest traditions of the Tour de France. The attack was on, and the decision was now for others to make. Relentlessly, Chiapucci kept the pressure on as he raced through the corridor of people towards the top of the Col d'Aspin. He gives way only for the sprinters to snatch the mountain points. He has a far bigger prize in mind. His lead over the first climb is just 34 seconds as he and his group of 10 begin the race down towards the base of the Col du Tourmalet. Goodness knows what Chiappucci's breakaway companions are thinking, but the yellow jersey now has a lead of over a minute, and the Tour is taking on a new dimension. Greg LeMond, his racing jersey wide open, must be wondering too, what is happening? Surely Chiappucci can't keep up such an attack. And he fights to limit the gains with 2 mountains still to come. The Col du Tourmalet, a brute of a climb that just goes up and up. It's here where LeMond and the other leaders hope that Chiappucci will prove the error of his attack. But at the start of the climb, his lead is up to almost 3 minutes. Claudie Quequillion, the champion of Belgium, is also having a great tour, but there is still no sign of the names expected at the front. On through the mountain resort of La Mongie, and Chiappucci, his group thinning out, is left now with only the Belgian Johan Bruneel and the Italian Roberto Conti. Neither rider has a chance of winning the Tour de France, but they are both proving to be valuable allies to Chiappucci. Pedro Delgado, riding on the edge of his own country, is being forced to follow rather than lead on his favourite terrain. He relies on teammate Miguel Indurain, while Greg LeMond relies on his teammate Bruno Cornier. The chase seems at last to be beginning, and Spaniard Miguel Martinez Torres avoids the confusion by going ahead of Chiappucci's group by himself. Chiappucci, out in front since the start of the Aspin, still has Bruneel and 3 other riders for company. But when you are the race leader, you tend to have to do all of the work, while Greg LeMond here and Pedro Delgado rely on their teammates to set the pace. Another huge crowd on the summit of the Tourmalet sees Martinez Torres climbing to a 3-minute advantage. It wasn't quite the name the crowd expected to see, but as many are Spanish here anyway, the nationality is pleasing them. This gives you an idea as to just how steep the final corners of the Tourmalet are, and Torres climbs it very well. The newspaper, by the way, is not for a read on the way down. It's for keeping the cold wind off the chest. The riders continue to climb the mountain, but still there are the top names not evident. Just the riders who escaped in the early breakaway with Chiappucci. As so often happens when the champion leads the attack, other riders tend to slip away off the front. So unusually, the top names in this Tour de France were still to pass over the summit. A long, hard road to the top of the Col du Tourmalet. Chiappucci was still riding behind as the leaders go over the top. The yellow jersey, still with Conti, Bruneel, Regis Simon, reaches the top. Just the descent and then the last climb and the finish to come. Conti outsprints Chiappucci for the banner. Behind, Thierry Claverolas scores well again to consolidate his lead in the King of the Mountains competition. Last year, the Frenchman was forced out of the Tour de France when he crashed while leading in the same competition. More than 2 minutes later, the elite group heads towards the summit, led by Marino Lajareta on the left and the tall Miguel Indurain. Delgado is in the centre, and LeMond tracks the back wheel of Indurain on the right. Others in the group include Fabio Parra from Colombia and Dmitriev Konishev, the fast-improving Soviet rider. Indurain is a revelation in this Tour de France. Surely now he must regret having played such an unselfish role in the Alps to help Delgado. The group goes over the top knowing that the chase must be fast and determined if Chiappucci, the brilliant Chiappucci, is to be brought back to heel. Miguel Martinez Torres has no illusions of winning the Tour de France, just a stage. He is far too far behind overall, while Greg LeMond launches the attack on the descent to cut back the lead of Chiappucci, now only just ahead. The chase downhill lasts for more than 20 minutes at speeds of 90 kilometers an hour. The checks indicate, though, that Chiappucci will soon be caught, and so he is. At the base of the final climb, the yellow jersey is caught after an attack that will find a place in the colourful history of the Tour de France. Chiappucci still sits at the front of the reformed field as the final climb begins, but now he has the most feared names alongside him, except that of Eric Breukink, who's had a mechanical problem and a bad day in the Pyrenees. Greg LeMond has chased for most of the day. He has now caught his quarry, the race leader, the Maillot Jaune, and he sits and watches him. The face of LeMond gives nothing away. It appears he's climbing very well indeed. Chiappucci is trailed by Miguel Indurain, Greg LeMond, Pedro Delgado and Claude Quequelin. Nobody's really interested in the poor old Miguel Torres, who still rides just ahead thinking of a stage win. And nobody wants to help either the Maillot Jaune. Fabio Parra attacks on the right and Greg LeMond is the first to react. Marino Lajaretta takes LeMond's wheel. Conti follows, and soon everybody has moved across the road. There's one man, though, who finds he can't. The yellow jersey of Claudio Chiappucci is falling back. The gamble of the day appears now to have been the biggest mistake of the day. As the group containing Greg LeMond and all of the Tour favourites except Eric Breukink goes clear, Claudio Chiappucci is now having to fight to keep the race lead. The only thing in his favour is the time he holds in hand over the riders going ahead of him. Around a hairpin bend, the LeMond group rapidly go away. At last, Greg LeMond has got the move he was looking for, a chance to distance the man in yellow. The world champion, who started the season so badly, so out of form, was finding it on the day that mattered most, the road to Les Ardennes. Cathy LeMond watches on television on the peak summit. And what she sees is what she hoped she would see. Her husband Greg driving the pace. Miguel Indurain, Marino Lajaretta are the only two riders now who have matched the speed of Greg LeMond. Surprisingly, Pedro Delgado has dropped away. But Delgado hasn't dropped away quite as far as the yellow jersey of Claudio Chiappucci. He still lived in hope that he would lead the Tour by the end of the day. This is Delgado trying desperately now to salvage a few seconds before the finish. He breaks away from Claude Quequelin and Andy Hampsten. But Bruno Cornier finds the strength from somewhere to catch up with Delgado. The mountains should have been the favourite hunting ground for Pedro, as they were when he won the Tour de France back in 1988, but he hasn't produced the same form this year. Greg LeMond was receiving absolutely no help at all from the two Spanish riders, Lejarreta and at the back, Miguel Indurain. They had no intention of helping him either. They were searching, in fact, just for the stage win here on the Spanish borders. After all the flags were the Basque variety. LeMond was thinking now in terms of seconds. Every second he gained over the field meant a second closer the maillot jaune of the Tour de France. And so, with 3 kilometers to go, Lejarreta was dropped off the back, while Lejarreta's teammate, Miguel Martinez Torres, was finally caught. He'd been off the front. Now there was nobody in front of these two riders. It was purely a matter of which one would win and how much time they would gain over the yellow jersey. Further down the mountain, the yellow jersey was still in serious trouble. Towards the top, Greg LeMond was riding with an inspiration he'd never shown before in this year's Tour de France. And surely too, Miguel Indurain was badly regretting now waiting for his teammate Pedro Delgado down in the valley road towards the climb of Alpe d'Huez, because had he not lost so much time on that day, he might have been a real challenger now to Greg LeMond and Claudio Chiappucci. Luzardiden was becoming one of the most famous climbs in the Tour de France, just like Alpe d'Huez did in the last decade. Just look at the people here now. They had come from far and wide. This was a great festive day, but it was above all the day that they thought the Tour de France would be decided. And we'd have to wait for the clock to start counting before anybody could say that. Into the last few kilometers for the two leaders, Claudio Quintilian was trying desperately now to drop even Pedro Delgado, while behind them all was the yellow jersey still toiling and suffering of Chiappucci. No help at all for Greg LeMond. He was having to win this Tour de France purely on his own strength, if indeed he was going to win it. LeMond knew he needed time and needed it on this climb, because tomorrow there is no great climbs on the course. It would leave just one time trial before the finish in Paris. He needed time, and he needed it now over Claudio Chiappucci. He was not concerned about the stage victory, and quite clearly that most certainly was in the mind of Miguel Indurain, who was waiting for his moment. But he didn't fancy water over the back of his neck either. The finish is as high as you can see. There are still a few uphill slopes to come, but you'd never see them through this crowd. And the cheers were still there too for Claudio Chiappucci. For anybody watching it on television all day, they know just what a great ride he put in. The crowd narrowed the road down to just the width of a car, and Greg LeMond picks his way through and never once turns round to ask Indurain for help. To the final bend, and at last Miguel Indurain lines up for the finish. Greg LeMond is grateful for his back wheel, but not for long. Indurain applies the pressure, just enough to crack the world champion. Greg LeMond's pacemaking up the hill had been formidable, but Indurain now was thinking only of the stage victory. It reminded one a little bit of the battle between Greg LeMond and Laurent Fignon a year ago on top of the Col de Peyresourde and Super-Bagnères. Then, of course, it was Fignon going clear. This time, it was Indurain. Round the final bend, the finish banner was in sight, and after 7 hours of riding at an incredible average speed of 39 kilometers an hour, the Spaniard Miguel Indurain wins this classic stage. Greg LeMond arrived just 6 seconds behind him. And then the media move in.
How much you dug up?
C'est le Colombien Sarah, il y a maintenant 1 minute et 7 secondes que Miguel Indurain a franchi la ligne d'arrivée. Voilà Fabio Parra qui termine avec un retard.
Clark Quillion came in as well. Marina Lagyereta had finished third. Martinez Torres had taken 4th place. Still no sign, though, of the yellow jersey. Had Greg LeMond taken the race lead? The clock was counting down. Claudio Chiappucci was alone now. He'd been alone for most of the day, really, because nobody had been willing to help him. He sprinted up to the line with the clock still counting down, and when he crossed it, he'd kept his yellow jersey by just 5 seconds.
No, je me sens très bon.
Greg, you're just 5 seconds behind the jersey. Do you think
Perfect.
you got the jersey now?
It's not one until the time trial, but it looks very good.
Well, you know the time trial. You know the time trial at Lac de Vassivière because you won there in '85.
It's a,
for 5 seconds. You lost the maillot jaune.
oui, mais
Okay. So, Greg, you know the time trial in Lac de Vassivière. You must feel confident.
I feel very confident. I think I can beat Cappuccino. If I can't, then I don't deserve to win.
5 seconds separating you and the yellow jersey right now, Greg.
I think I'm very confident I can win because I know I'm better than Cappuccino at time trials. The last one's especially good for me, and I feel totally fresh.
Was your strategy just constant attack at the finish?
Well, I wasn't sure how everybody felt. I tell you, I went into the stage I thought all I had to do was follow Delgado. I thought Delgado would be the one who attacked. But when I saw Cappuccino was gone in a break and nobody responded on the Tourmalet, I said, we're going to let him go. And I said, it's all or nothing. And glad I did it because I think I killed Delgado. He had to come back to me, and we raced a race that was superb with the team.
Did you think the Tour de France might be won today in this stage?
It's won today. It's not over till Champs-Élysées, but if I'm going to win, it's won today, no doubt. I can't say what the percentage, but it's a very, very good percentage that I'm going to maybe win.
Thank you.
So we go on. The 18th of July, the roads are a little bit flatter, 150 kilometres, taking them from Lourdes across to Pau. Normally in the Tour de France, Pau is the gateway to the Pyrenees. This time, it was the way out. Before leaving the religious centre of France, the riders did a circuit of the city. The major climb of the day, the Col de Marie Blanc. But as soon as the race got underway, the radio tour was announcing riders giving up, and they announced the abandon of the rider Guido Winterberg. There'll be more of those this day as well. But still in the yellow jersey, Claudio Chiappucci, who survived his most difficult day to keep his lead by just 5 seconds. Remember the day when it was once 10 minutes? The climb of the Col de la Marie Blanc, the crowds again had turned out in their tens of thousands. They were waiting for the moment when the yellow jersey would change shoulders. This time, the field, in the beginning at least, stayed largely together. The yellow jersey riding well, never far from the race lead. There were always those willing to test, to attack and hope they could escape. There was really now only a handful of riders left in this race for the final kill in Paris. Others were looking for the stage win. After all, every day was a big prize day if you could win the prize money. Over the top of the Col de la Mare Blanc, the field were all together. All that mattered, that was, and Greg LeMond was feeling in buoyant mood. 5 seconds off the lead, and no pressure yet to defend the yellow jersey. That was still the priority of Claudio Chiappucci. But this day wasn't to be quite as simple as that. There are other things in the world apart from the human body, like punctures, and Greg LeMond was going to get one very shortly that could well change the face of this Tour de France. On the way down the Mare Blanc, Greg LeMond has a flat tyre. He is now in big trouble. He was left on the roadside with no team around him, no team car to help him, and he stood there for 3 minutes. The field ahead raced on. Eric Breking was now having a chance to pull back time he'd lost earlier in the Pyrenees. Marino Lagiaretta was still a real challenger in this race. Andy Hampsten, who wouldn't attack Greg LeMond necessarily, was now in the front group as well. Gilles de Lyon. They were all here now, all thinking of gaining ground over the bad luck of Greg LeMond. Pedro Delgado was driving the pace too. Zimmermann, Massimo Girotto, all of the teammates here of Claudio Chiappucci were driving the pace. Strangely, at the time of the puncture, there had been a small breakaway, and LeMond's teammates were in that leading group. They'd now been ordered back to await their stricken leader. They're not allowed to turn round and go back towards the race. That is totally against the rules. So they were ordered to stop and wait on the roadside by the team manager, Roger Leger. LeMond comes up at high speed. His team now were dragging him back into the race. It was a marvellous exhibition of team riding. Greg LeMond was being paced back up to the lead pack of Claudio Chiappucci by his teammates. Had this happened a year ago, LeMond may never have rejoined the leaders because only one rider in his team finished alongside him, Johan Lammerts. So, on a day when LeMond got a scare, he came back into the race leader frame, and then the little men were allowed the chance to win the stage. It's always a poor phrase to use, little men. Anybody that wins a stage in the Tour de France is a great cyclist, and this was also an historic day down in Pau. On the left of the screen, Dmitry Konishev became the first Soviet rider ever to win a stage of the Tour de France. He beat Tour first-timer Johan Brunel. In third place, the Canadian Steve Bauer, 11 seconds back, and the fourth place sprint was won by Jean-Claude Colotti. And so to stage 18, 202 kilometres, heading out to Bordeaux, the hot flatlands. At the start of the stage, Greg LeMond was busy telling the press how unhappy he was that Claudio Chiappucci had chosen to attack him when he was stricken by a puncture. He said it simply wasn't sporting. So there seemed to be a little bit of rivalry beginning between Greg LeMond and Claudio Chiappucci, and it wasn't just a sporting one. Traditionally, Bordeaux is the hottest part of France. The riders were ready for that. And Greg LeMond, of course, was thinking now of the time trial when he hopefully would take the race lead. Stephen Roach takes a letter in from home, others make telephone calls, and Greg LeMond, for the moment at least, the pressure is off. And so the bunch rolled along fairly much together for all of the day, until they came close towards the finish, and the Australian Phil Anderson was out to try and win the stage. A small group developed at the head of the field and was gradually picking up strength in numbers. Phil Anderson was the animator. But the main field was always hunting them down. Claudio Chiappucci had had a painless day. He never allowed Greg LeMond out of his sight. After all, a 5-second gap, that could be so easily taken at any time if you don't shadow your man. Coming towards the finish, a small breakaway group did develop. Surprisingly, Gianni Bugno, the winner at Alpe d'Huez, was the inspiration of the move. taking with him his teammate Roberto Gusmeroli and also Eric Breukink. Just ahead in the main field, it was the Italian Bugno who wins his second stage. Eric Breukink finished second, and he makes an amazing 18-second gain, which could be important over all of the Tour leaders, led home here by Giovanni Fidenza. Stage 19, 102.5 kilometres. And again, between Castillon and Limoges, nothing really was expected to happen. The riders were now becoming very keyed up for the final time trial, the big showdown between Greg LeMond and Claudio Chiappucci. The green jersey being worn here by Olaf Ludwig in his first Tour de France is awarded to the most consistent daily finisher. He'd won one stage and he'd taken part in many of the bunch sprints near the front in others. LeMond takes time out to have a chat with Tour organiser Jean-Marie Leblanc, himself a former Tour rider. All these things were the sign that there was not going to be a lot of action from the leaders this day. LeMond even had time for a mechanical problem as well. And by picking his way through the convoy, he soon rejoins the field. And then a late breakaway and a fine piece of solo riding by Guido Bontempi of Italy. His vast experience and his recovering from injury, he's realised the leaders are taking a sort of day off. He's broken clear and wins the stage by 1 minute and 28 seconds. The Carreras are having a great tour. The lead with Chiappucci and now a stage win. So too, the penultimate day of the Tour de France, a time trial around Lac de Vassivière, the beautiful centre of the Limoges countryside. It's a ride of 45.5 kilometres. Greg LeMond knows he must perform this day better than ever before to win the leader's yellow jersey. The same could be said of Claudio Chiappucci, who has to keep the leader's yellow jersey. During 3 weeks, Claudio Chiappucci has become a great star. He's all set now to win the Tour de France. All that prevents him is the time trial, 45.5 kilometres. The time trial is a mass of concentration. Raul Alcala here is ready for the off. Already the winner of one time trial in this year's Tour de France, Raul Alcala is the only Mexican to ever win a stage of the Tour de France. He's won one this year, and he won one last year in Belgium at Spa-Francorchamps. And so far at all of the time checks, he's all set now to win another one. Raul Alcala approaches the finish with a great time. It's the fastest so far, and he crosses the line with a time of 1 hour, 3 minutes and 8 seconds. Pedro Delgado will not be aware of what Alcala has done as he sets off. Delgado needs a very good performance to beat this rider, Eric Breukink. They're fighting out now at least the third place on the podium in Paris. Eric Breukink sets off too. Jan Gispers, his team manager, cheers him all of the way. Delgado is down at the time checks to Breukink. He's going to have to find an extraordinarily good finish to beat the Dutchman. With a ride of 1 hour and 5 minutes, Delgado knows that won't be good enough to beat Dutchman Eric Breukink. And when Eric Breukink comes up to the finishing line, he's recording the best time of the day so far. 1 hour, 2 minutes and 40 seconds, 28 seconds better than Raul Alcala. That surely now has confirmed a top 3 finish in Paris. Unconcerned about the rider of Breukink are these two men. They are in a personal battle for yellow, and Greg LeMond starts ahead of Claudio Chiappucci. Greg LeMond knows the circuit. He also has happy memories here, because in 1985, he won his first ever stage of the Tour de France around this very course. On that occasion, he beat the legendary Bernard Hinault. Hinault, of course, going on to win the Tour de France, and Greg LeMond to finish second. Claudio Chiappucci departs behind Greg LeMond. Both leaders are now on course. The Europeans call this the race of truth. There's no hiding behind anybody. There's no saying you feel ill. There's no blaming anything at all. Only your legs. Greg LeMond was rapidly into his stride. His time checks were good and consistently faster than Claudio Chiappucci's at every time check. Greg LeMond knew by the support from his following car he was now racing to the yellow jersey of the Tour de France just 24 hours before the finish. Approaching the finishing line, Greg LeMond was well outside the winning time of Eric Breukink, but it was a time of 1 hour, 3 minutes and 37 seconds. It should be a lot better than Claudio Chiappucci. The media move in for the kill as well, and LeMond was having none of it. And sure enough, Claudio Chiappucci approaches the finish riding his last day in the Tour de France in the yellow jersey. His time, 1 hour, 5 minutes and 58 seconds, 2 minutes, 21 seconds slower than Greg LeMond. And so, the famous four, the four riders who dominated this race from day one, were now all behind the new leader, Greg LeMond of the United States. In yellow, and 1 day to come. A train journey to the outskirts of Paris will start the final stage of 182.5 kilometers from Bretigny to Paris in the shadow of the Arc de Triomphe and, of course, the famous Eiffel Tower. The whole field comes into Paris together. Nobody is behind the race and nobody in front. You know, when the riders finally see the Eiffel Tower, everyone will tell you they break out in large goose pimples. They are so motivated after a long 3 weeks in the saddle. What they fear most is being dropped from the peloton in the view of the world on the famous Champs-Élysées. But the field stays together. As time after time it goes up and down the most sacred cobbled roads in the world. Greg LeMond is in yellow, Claudio Chiappucci is in second place, Eric Breukink is in third place. And the Z team of Greg LeMond makes sure he has no problems. They dominate the head of the field. Lap after lap of the Champs-Élysées, the pace is kept so high nobody can escape off the front. Eric Breukink rides behind Greg LeMond, Claudio Chiappucci on the far side of him. These are the men who've been the stars in this year's Tour de France, and this day wasn't going to change anything. Greg LeMond, the first American to win the Tour de France in 1986. He did it again so dramatically last year by 8 seconds on this very road in a time trial when he beat Laurent Fignon, and now this year he's going to win again. Guarded by his faithful teammate, Gilbert Duclos-Lassalle, number 4. Everybody wants to win the final stage of the Tour de France on the Champs-Élysées in Paris. It's normally reserved for the sprinters, those greyhound of men who can usually go faster than anybody else at any time. And so it was to prove. In the big sprint finish, Johan Museeuw, who'd won the stage at Mont Saint-Michel on the Normandy coastline, was home again. This time, he was finishing ahead of Adriano Baffi, the Italian, who tried so hard to win a stage, and he never quite got there. And so the American Greg LeMond has won his third Tour de France, and this is the result. Greg LeMond of the United States and the French Z team, the 3,400 kilometers in 90 hours, 43 minutes and 20 seconds. A superb average speed of 37.519 kilometers an hour. In second place, and he'll never be the same again, he'll always be a star now, Claudio Chiappucci of Italy and Carrera, 2 minutes 16 seconds behind LeMond. Eric Breking from the Netherlands and the Dutch PDM team, 2 minutes 29 seconds back. Pedro Delgado, third last year, he finishes fourth this time from Spain, 5 minutes and 1 second behind. And fifth, the most consistent stage race rider in the world, Marina Lajareta of Spain, 5 minutes 5 seconds back. And in sixth place, Eduardo Chozas of Spain at 9 minutes 14 seconds.